All right, welcome back. So this is a hot topic today. Texas is among the states that list obesity as an underlying health condition. And so that means that those who are obese qualify for a COVID vaccination under that phase 1B. A lot of mixed feelings about this one. So joining me now is healthcare expert and host of the podcast Civil Discourse, Todd Furniss. Todd, hello.
How are you?
I'm great. Okay, let's first define obesity. And second, why is obesity then considered an underlying health condition?
Well, obesity is a measure of your body weight and your height, given a bunch of other statistics that are available. And the idea is that if your ratio is out of kilter, if you have too much body weight for your size, for your frame, then you are theoretically obese. Now, it's an imperfect measure for a bunch of reasons. However, the issue is not so much what your weight is or isn't. The real issue is all of the things that go along with obesity or are highly correlated to obesity. So, for example, frequently people have high cholesterol, they have other blockages, they have pressures put on their organs and other systems that are particularly and acutely affected when they get COVID.
And so the thought behind this decision to include folks in this, 1B category who are struggling with obesity really comes down to the fact that people who are obese are more likely to have worse outcomes from COVID-19. And also I've heard from healthcare workers and professionals that it's harder to intubate them if that becomes necessary.
You're exactly right, Sonia. And the measures, and in fact, the timing of your inquiry here is perfect because the CDC came out today and said that 78% of those hospitalized, intubated, or who died from COVID had obesity or were obese. So there's a correlation between the systemic challenges that are placed on one's body when you are obese. And I would also point out, buried in the study is also the point made by the CDC that if you are particularly underweight, you also have problems. So the idea of having access to a vaccine when you're in that high of a risk category is very, very important.
I hadn't heard that about underweight. That's interesting to me. I'm going to look into that as well. BMI, we talked about this a little bit, sort of that formula that technically measures obesity. What do people need to know? If they, if you're kind of walking around going, I don't know my BMI, how can I measure that? How important is it?
It is increasingly important, and again, it's an imperfect measure. The best and safest way, of course, is to go to your primary care physician and get it measured. But there are all sorts of scales and other devices available now, commercially available at retail stores, that can measure your BMI. Again, I recommend that you go to see your primary care physician as soon as possible. This is something I wrote about in my book, The 60% Solution, really strongly advocating greater use of your primary care physician.
Yeah, I feel like especially in the last year, people may have experienced a fluctuating BMI, maybe without even knowing it, since we've been at home and a little more, sedentary. So I agree with you about going to see your doctor. Finally, what if your BMI is 30, but maybe you don't consider yourself obese? Should you get this vaccine? At what point do you kind of have to have an honest conversation with yourself?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. You have to have an honest conversation with yourself, because unless you're a particularly athletic person or you're a bodybuilder of sorts, then having a high BMI is not a healthy thing. Over time, you're going to have problems. Either you're going to have problems with your organs, you're going to have problems with your joints, or both. So going to see your physician sooner rather than later is critical, because the real issue is making sure you understand the health problems you have before you, so that you can take precautionary measures or proactive measures to mitigate those.
Yeah, all great information. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, y'all, we're back in about 2 minutes.